Hi, how's it going? This is Resident of Colloid for YouTube, and I'm back here this morning to do a Dark Shadows video on this St. Patrick's Day. I wanted to talk about the poll results for my poll I did on Twitter. I had asked if or when Dark Shadows comes back as a series, what would you like to see it do most? And the options were reboot, retcon, or sequel to the original series. And 34 votes. I want to thank everybody who voted. So thank you to all who voted. 11.8 for a reboot, 5.9 for a retcon, 82.4 for a sequel to the original series. And you might say, does that shock me? No, it doesn't. And I'll tell you why. You really have to look at the history of Dark Shadows as a television series. I think that's the first and foremost thing you have to look at. Not the movies necessarily, but the series itself. Keep in mind, the original series left a lot of room for a sequel. I think that's the most important thing. And no, that's not an opinion. That's a fact. That's not me giving some half-based opinion. No, this is actual fact. Dark Shadows left plenty room. The original series left plenty room for a sequel. And you might say, well, how? How did they leave room for a sequel? Well, by the end of the series, Barnabas, yes, was cured from his vampirism. Angelique had released him from that spell. And when he and Julia and Professor Stokes returned from parallel time, they're back in 1970, you know, and literally everything's fine. Elizabeth walks in, Collinwood is no longer destroyed, and they all walk out and they head to the observatory, I believe. So, where Roger's giving a speech, and Quentin's there, and Carolyn's there, and David's there. Like, they're all at that place, so you don't see them, but Elizabeth says they're there. And Elizabeth wouldn't lie about something like that. Now, you might say, well, how does that leave room for a sequel? Well, here's the thing. Chris Jennings is still out there as a werewolf. He was not cured of his werewolf affliction. Um, Quentin Collins' portrait, if it's destroyed, will turn him into a werewolf. He can't age as long as that portrait's in existence. So, or even let alone turn into the werewolf. So, it's sort of Dorian Grayish, if you will, if you want to get into the history of Dorian Gray a bit. Dorian Gray was a character who made a deal with the devil to stay immortal as long as his portrait was intact. That's the rough explanation of it. So Quentin, though he didn't make a deal with the devil, and that's the big difference. He wasn't making deals with anybody to get his portrait made. It was just made. um, and really, Patofe did that, allowed Charles Delaware Tate to do that so he could take over Quentin's body, really. So he wasn't turning into the werewolf. That's really what the motive of that really was. So Quentin is out there, Chris is out there. And really, today, the modern day, you would have the descendants of David and Carolyn living at Collinwood. And I could still see Carolyn and David being there. Now, do I think they would get Nancy Barrett to come back? Yeah, I do. I think they could get her to come back. Could they get David Hensley to come back? I would love for him to come back, but he's given up acting, and I respect that. So I think, yes, they would have to recast David, unfortunately, but if, again, they need to get moving on this if they're actually going to do something to this nature. And look, Carolyn, it wouldn't be so much about Carolyn and David, it would be about their children. Um, how they've grown up and now have kids of their own, so they're becoming grandparents, and everything seems normal for once in Collinwood, and then stuff starts to happen again. So, and as far as Barnabas Collins goes, what has become of him, you ask? Well, he would be dead probably by this point in time. And you might say, well, he's dead. You can't bring him back, right? Actually, you could, because remember, in the series, now this is where House of Dark Shadows takes from the series. Julia Hoffman did take a sample of his blood before starting the experiments in the series. So, and House of Dark Shadows really mimics a lot of what the series was doing. They changed things, obviously, because it's a movie, but, and I've gotten into that in my House of Dark Shadows video, so you can go check that out. But I think that that's one thing that they could definitely explore, that maybe a descendant of Julia's has the vampire blood of Barnabas and knows where his body is and has been has read Julia's diary of what Barnabas was and is sort of fascinated by the fact that he was cured. And it's not so much that Julia cured him, it's Angelique released the curse. And that's what it would have took all along, really, to cure Barnabas, even though technically Adam never died. It's not, I'm not even going to get into that. That's a whole other thing, right? Oh my God, Adam. I agree with something John Phillip was saying. Shout out to him, John Philip Betancourt. Adam and Carolyn should have had a love angle. They really should have. Could you imagine? And that when eventually I'm going to get him back on here, we're going to do Carolyn's curse, and there's something I want to ask him about Carolyn specifically. So Saturday, guys, I'm going to do a Star Wars video with Mark Yeoman at /Barnabas. I'm excited about that. And some people might ask, well, why wouldn't a reboot work? Why not vote more for a reboot or a retcon? I'll do the reboot first. Dark Shadows has been rebooted once in '91. And though the series had high moments and wasn't bad, really, when you look at the series for what it is, they had taken a lot of characters, like a Victoria Winters, like a Maggie Evans, and they had really given them a fresh coat of paint. And what I mean by that is they had changed some of their things to their characters. In the '91 revival, Victoria Winters isn't related to Elizabeth. She's not her daughter. Now they don't make that canon in the original, but that's basically, you might as well say, fact. In the original series, Victoria was supposed to be revealed as Elizabeth's other daughter that she had to another man. But in the revival, she's not Elizabeth's daughter. She's actually where Maggie Evans in the original series looked like Josette and Barnabas thought she was the reincarnation. They're sort of taking that plot point and applying it to Vicky in the revival. In the revival, Vicky literally is the reincarnation of Josette Dupre, or Josette Collins. So again, her main name's Dupre, so I often say Josette Dupre Collins. But so Josette Dupre Collins is how I'll say that. But Josette Collins basically is who she's a reincarnation of. And Barnabas and Josette were meant to be married, and we know they never were. Not only in the original, but they weren't married in the revival either. Oh my God. Poor Barnabas and Josette. I can't wait for you guys to read my story. I'm almost done with it. I'm so excited for you guys to look at it. It has a lot of twists and turns, is what I'll say. But the reboot in the 91 revival being a reboot, was it bad? No, but I think you know, if you're a Dark Shadows fan like me, you do like it a lot. It's really good. I think what gets undersold a lot in the series really is many people look at Ben Cross's performance. Oh, that's just Jonathan Frid. No, I completely disagree with that. Ben Cross's Barnabas is not Jonathan Frid's. I think Ben Cross did the one thing that no one would have dared to do. He found his own Barnabas. He was his own in many ways. You could say he had some of the Frid mannerisms, some, but not many. He had his own mannerisms. There was some, I think he left a little bit of Frid in there to pay tribute, but in all honesty, he was his own Barnabas. And that's something I don't think too many people really appreciate when you look at the 91 revival. But in all fairness, I think the reason the revival ultimately failed, and I know NBC pulled the plug prematurely, I think when you look at it, you go, okay, you have all these characters who you gave a fresh coat of paint on, but where's your new characters? Where's your new creations? That's something you really want in a series, is new, fresh characters that keep the series fresh. And bringing back familiar characters and giving them a fresh coat of paint each time, you can give that fresh coat of paint, but it's still going to be those characters' names who everyone's familiar with. And yes, familiarity is nice, but new is twice as great as familiarity. You sort of want I'm jumbling my words, the best of both worlds. You want new and you want familiarity. So, and I think that's why, you got a lot of people are pointing towards a sequel to the original series, because you could build your series around new, fresh characters like Carolyn and David's kids and grandkids, as opposed to just relying on the familiar characters completely. Yes, Carolyn and David would be there as sort of the foundation, but the main characters who you would focus on would be the younger blood, the younger generation, and then mix in the supernatural at a given point. So, and some people might say, well, why was retcon sort of a low man on a totem pole? Well, when you look at Dark Shadows, before I get into retcon, they did try a reboot in '04, but it was only shot, and it was an unaired pilot. And you can go watch that unaired pilot on YouTube. Is it good? Yes. Is it great? No. Again, Victoria Winters is a blonde, which I found really intriguing. A blonde-haired Victoria and a red-haired Angelique. But they're adding a fresh coat of paint. So they've tried the reboot phase for Dark Shadows. Now, many people will say, well, retcon. Here's the issue with that. Where do you retcon? Because you would be retconning the original series. You wouldn't be retconning the revival. The revival was only one season. Where do you retcon the original? And because if you retcon it back to the train station with Victoria, that's not a retcon, that's a reboot. You would literally either have to retcon it sometime after Barnabas got out or right before. And I just see that being a bigger mess than what it would be, honestly. I'm not saying it couldn't be done. I'm sure someone could think of something. But, retconning the series, again, where would that begin and end? Or especially begin, because the biggest issue I would have with that would be, okay, even if you didn't let Barnabas out, there's other problems that are going to happen, like Quentin's ghost, who's actually Gregory Trask. Again, there's just so much other things going on. So retconning really, you're not dealing with a slasher or a serial killer series, or you're dealing with the supernatural. And I think that's what gets lost about people with Dark Shadows. Oh, it was just a soap opera. No, it was a gothic soap opera that had every supernatural element you could imagine. In many ways, Dark Shadows inspired your Vampire Diaries, your Supernaturals, all that paranormal stuff. So, retcon, I get why it's the low man on the totem pole, because you sort of have to flip through and go, well, where do you start off at? So I think that's the big issue of the retcon. Like there's just, it would be really messy to retcon Dark Shadows. Really, really messy, in my opinion, anyway. And again, I just think when you look at a sequel for the original series, it would just make more sense to do it that way, as opposed to just rebooting it again and again and again, because again, that's something they've tried with Dark Shadows. So I definitely want to get you guys' thoughts. What would, again, there was the poll, but still let me hear from you. What would you like to see? And tell me why. Tell me why you think maybe a reboot would do better this time, or maybe a retcon. I do find that when I put retcon, I'm thinking, God, that's such an interesting choice to make, because when you do retcon Dark, if you were to retcon it, where would you retcon it from? That's the one question I had when I put that on my poll. I guess if I had to retcon Dark Shadows, it would have to be somewhere through parallel time, or right before. It would have to be during, when Barnabas goes to his first parallel time, which is 1970. There's no consequence for anything he would have done, none. And that's what I find most interesting. Barnabas literally could have did whatever the hell he wanted, and no one could have did a goddamn thing about it. And he sort of does the same thing he did in the other version. He's sort of greeting everybody, and he's plotting against Angelique, who doesn't even know him, because this is not his Angelique. So I think that's where I would sort of try to find the retcon, where something happened in parallel time that caused the change. Something, a yin for a yang, if that makes any sense, where something happened in parallel time that affected Barnabas's time in some sort of weird ass way. Maybe someone came through the door and it affected them. Because if Barnabas could, again, and they sort of hinted this with parallel time, Barnabas, Julia, and Professor Stokes all go to parallel time. Well, if somebody from 1970 parallel time can go to another parallel time, then those people from that parallel time can come to our time. And that's something that is hinted. It's never really done, but you never know. I guess that's where the retcon could start. So I answered my own question in a weird way. But definitely let me hear from you guys. I won't be on too much today, because I gotta get people up here in a little bit. But so I want to thank everybody who voted, and to all of my subscribers, my friends, my followers on Twitter. Thank you for supporting not only my channel but my blog, following me on Twitter. I can't thank you guys enough for making me feel welcome in the Dark Shadows universe. I love talking about it with you guys. And again, I always want to hear from you. So please let me know what you would want to see and why. And hell, let me know who you would cast. I would love to hear that. So I'm sorry this video is really long, but thank you guys so much from the bottom of my heart. Thank you so much. I hope you guys have a happy St. Patrick's Day. It is St. Patrick's Day. So have a happy St. Patrick's Day and have a good day. I'll see you guys.